Namaste, my friends. Welcome to Bhakti Yoga Conference hosted here at Harvard Divinity School. We're so honored to have you here with us. My name is Happy Jack, the founder of Happy Jack Yoga and a Master Divinity student here at Harvard. And we're just so honored to bring you together here for another heart-centered conversation. Really, the intention of this conference is to bring together prominent voices from different aspects of the Bhakti tradition, different Vedic traditions, and really understand how can we cultivate grace in an age of distraction. And we have over 1,600 registrants so far. Of course, a small subset who join us live here in Zoom, but for those catching the recording, thank you so much for being here with us as well. And I'm going to spotlight our very special guest here while I do an introduction. So I'm very, very privileged and honored to introduce Sadhviji. Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati is a renunciate monk or sannyasi living in an ashram on the banks of the sacred Ganga River in Rishikesh, India, nestled amidst the majestic Himalayan mountains. If you have not been to Parmarth Nikatan Ashram, my friends, you must go there. Oh my goodness, it's a second home. Originally from Los Angeles, California, and a graduate of Stanford University, she holds a Ph.D. in psychology and has dedicated her life to sharing the profound wisdom from the ancient Vedic tradition of India. Sadhviji is a best-selling author, a world-renowned speaker, a recipient of President Biden's Award for a Lifetime of Service, and she serves on the United Nations Advisory Council on Religion. And truly, you've been a huge inspiration for us, our community here at Happy Jack Yoga. We've been, started traveling to Parmarth Nikatan in 2012, but I'd say a very notable visit was in March of 2020. We were there and we were leading a nice yoga teacher training and a retreat nestled in at the ashram. And then, of course, that's when the pandemic happened and the whole world was freaking out. And we're like, life is perfect. We're here at Parmarth Nikatan Ashram and we don't want to go anywhere. But eventually, we were advised to get a flight home. And then we were back again in 2023. And we look forward to returning many more times for International Yoga Festival. Our session today is called Beyond Achievement, Bhakti Yoga and the True Meaning of Success. And my friends, if you are ready to get started with Sadhviji, please throw your arms in the air and loudly chant, Hari Bol! Sadhviji, welcome. So beautiful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Jack. And it's so beautiful to be with you again. We are missing you all here on the banks of Ganga and looking so forward to having you and your extended and extending community come and be together with us.
We look forward to that. We will definitely be back. And so we're going to have a little bit different session today. Some of the previous sessions were presentations, and today we're going to have a little bit more of a dialogue, which we're looking forward to. And it's easy for us to look to you, Sadhviji, somebody who's been, living as a renunciate monk for decades and, leading in many different capacities, and as inspiring as that is, without knowing the backstory. If you haven't read From Hollywood to Himalayas, I highly recommend that. But if we don't know the backstory, can you tell us a little bit about what was your life like before spirituality? It's hard to imagine that. Was there a non-spiritual Sadhviji? Did that exist at some point?
So, yeah, the journey really has been, as the title of my memoir says, from Hollywood to the Himalayas, via Palo Alto along the way. But it's been such an extraordinary journey, and it's been such a journey of blessings. Mm. When you say, was there ever a non-spiritual Sadhviji? I think the answer is no, but there was certainly a young woman who had no idea she was spiritual, a young woman who thought that she was disqualified from spirituality, who really never thought much about it other than the occasional times that it came up and she realized that this was not for her. But I was an academic. I was a scientist. I was someone with an active social life. I was also someone who was working through, struggling with, managing an emotional and psychological life that took up so much of my time and energy. I had grown up, as the title says, quite literally in Hollywood, and had all of the privilege and possibility that that life entails, all of the money and the prosperity and the education and all of that. And I always say, if you had looked at me from the outside, you would have said, this girl has everything. Good family, good education, good home, vacations in the right places, and does this and does that, all the things that we are told we need to be happy. We're given this happiness equation, and the happiness equation says, if you want to be happy, here are the components of happiness. You need a good education, the right degree, a lot of money, a successful position, a nice house in the right area of town, the right clothes. You need to look right in the right clothes. And you need that life. Now, of course, we also have social media, so it's a whole other piece. But at that time, that didn't exist. You just needed to have all of these things. And I always say that my friends and I were happy by default, as in we had the things we were told to be happy. And yet, on the deepest level, we weren't. And one reason we weren't is, of course, the obvious, which is, hey, those things don't actually bring happiness. The other is, on a deep personal level, I was also really struggling. I had been through a lot in the midst of the privilege and the abundance and the blessings and the beautifulness of so much of my early childhood. I also had really suffered and struggled and been through trauma and abuse and abandonment and kind of a full package of stuff that, as I went through my adolescence, really occupied most of my mind and my time, my energy. The fact that I managed to get into Stanford, to get through Stanford, to get into a PhD program, to get straight A's in a PhD program was remarkable enough in and of itself. And so the fact that I didn't also have an active spiritual life was not something that I ever thought about. I never felt like, oh, I really should have this thing. I didn't know anyone who was spiritual. I didn't know anyone who was deeply religious. I certainly knew people who played religious roles, but I didn't know anyone who really lived with that spark of spirituality that would make you think, oh, that's something I want. Oh, that's, the answer to my sufferings. And in the moments where different spiritual events or occurrences or things would very, very rarely arise, I always felt somehow disqualified from it. I wasn't interested. It didn't touch me in the way that I expected that it should. I didn't have the experiences that I expected that I should. Plus, given the history that I had been through in early childhood, there was always a part of me that felt disqualified in general, as though I were not pure enough or right enough or good enough or worthy enough for God's presence or God's love or to have a spiritual experience. But it wasn't something that filled my mind much. It wasn't something that I thought about very much. As I said, I was really living as a scientist, as an academic, my social life. I had gotten married right after undergrad at 22. And, so I was navigating a relationship. And so there was a lot that was occupying my life. In retrospect, I can look at so many things about my life and realize that I was so deeply spiritual, but they just were not things that were part of what my definition of spirituality was at the time. So it's only now from the framework of what spirituality really means that I can look back and say, oh, yes, I really was spiritual. I just wouldn't have self-identified as it at the time.
Got it. Well, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful perspective, and good for all of us to hear. For maybe some of us newer on the spiritual path, maybe thinking, "Oh, I'm not spiritual," but it's just a matter of understanding who we are and where we are on this journey. Now, again, in your memoir, From Hollywood to the Himalayas, there was I would say, a pivotal moment, a beautiful moment in your spiritual life when you put your feet in Mother Ganga. And would you tell us a little bit about either that moment or a moment when it's like, okay, this is how I'm gonna spend my life. This is real. I'm gonna give myself fully to this. Will you tell us a little bit about that moment?
It absolutely was that moment. And the moment was totally unexpected. I had come to India at 25 with a backpack on an adventure. I was an avid traveler. I had done a lot of traveling as a youngster with my parents, and then even as I made it through my teenage years, lots and lots on my own. And then, of course, in my 20s, even more on my own with friends. And India was suggested as a place to go. I didn't know anything about India. I didn't have a call to India even. The only reason that I agreed to go to India was, first of all, because my husband really wanted to come. And so just to, make him happy. But also because I was a very strict vegetarian. And traveling throughout Europe, which I had done a lot of, traveling across the US, which I had done a lot of, as a very strict vegetarian, I was a vegan even, was super, super, super difficult. And mostly consisted of walking into places like Burger King and saying, give me a cheeseburger, hold the burger, hold the cheese. And I mean, literally, that was what a lot of my meals in various parts of the world consisted of, because people didn't understand what vegetarian really meant. And they'd have chicken broth in soups. They would cook rice in chicken broth. They would put fish in God knows everything, eggs in everything. And when you're not used to the place and you don't speak the language and you are not cooking for yourself, it can be really, really, really difficult. And one thing I had learned was that wherever I was in the world, if I could find an Indian restaurant, I could get pure vegetarian food. And that Indians really understood what vegetarian meant. And so I agreed because I knew that at least actually I would be able to travel in a way without the sheer fact of trying to find vegetarian food as something that was this major, major struggle. So as we're flying to India, literally, somewhere, I still remember it was somewhere just before we had touched down in Singapore. We were flying from San Francisco, Singapore, Delhi. And somewhere just before touching down in Singapore, I had this moment of, what am I doing? Like, I'm flying across the world to a place I know nothing about. I have no real interest in going, only essentially because I can get good vegetarian food. And I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I could get really good, pure Indian vegetarian food on my corner. And I was in the midst of this PhD program I loved. And I thought, why am I doing this? Yeah, okay to make him happy, but that wasn't really my personality to give up 3.5 months of my life just because he wanted to go to India. So I had this moment of thinking, there must be a reason that I'm going that I'm not aware of. Because I was not just an aimless wanderer. I was not someone who did things totally randomly. So I realized there must be a reason. And I just don't know what the reason is. And so I have to keep my heart open. Because even though I was not a spiritual or religious person, I always deeply believed in the presence of what I would call a capital P planner. Like I had spent enough time in science labs to not believe that this whole thing was just random. Like I had worked with, crucibles and Bunsen burners and beakers, and I just did not believe for a moment that this whole thing had just happened utterly randomly without there being an energy, a wisdom, a knowing. I wouldn't have been able to tell you how I conceived of that planner, but I just knew. I knew there was a capital P planner who had put this whole incredible and intricate existence into motion. So I said, all right, there must be a reason I'm going, and I have to just keep my heart open so that I can see it and experience it. We go to, we're in Delhi, first place, and it was in the days pre-Google. So we had a 500-page Lonely Planet guidebook, open it up in Delhi, and I say Rishikesh. I mean, it was just like that, sitting over a cup of coffee in Delhi. And I open this up and I say, Rishikesh. And so it sounded great. I've always been a nature person, and mountains and river. And we were both yoga students. It was a yoga place. So come to Rishikesh and put our bags down in the hotel. And I said, I'm going to go down to the river and put my feet in the river. It was just that. I was hot, I was tired, and I was done with enough people and crowds, and I just wanted to be with nature. And I thought, I'm just going to go and I'm going to sit on the banks of this river and put my feet in and have a few quiet just moments. I didn't even know Ganga was holy. I just knew it was a river. I did not know it was the mother goddess. I did not know that it was this sacred, sacred mother, just that it was a river. And so I walk down to Ganga and I stand right on the banks of this river, worshipped as the mother goddess. And suddenly I had this experience of being in the presence of the divine. And it felt like a veil was pulled off, not only off my eyes, but off of my mind, off of every way of seeing and knowing and understanding that I ever had. And suddenly I could see. And I could see the divine in all as everything. And also as me. That there was no border or boundary between me and this divine everythingness. And in the midst of any moment that I had ever had previously in my life, the fact that I was actually divine was never something that had occurred to me. And if you had said it to me, I would have told you, thank you so much for trying to make me feel better, but I really don't need your platitudes. And, I appreciate it. Nice effort. But I'm doing the best I can. And, I'm learning to manage my life and manage things and, move on. But, spare me the platitudes, basically. And it just had never occurred to me that I actually was one with the divine. And it was never something anybody had ever said to me. It was never something I had read somewhere. It was never something I had heard someone say in a lecture or a sermon. Nothing. the idea that there was a divine perfection and it was inseparable from me was the most powerful experience that I had ever had. And it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't just an intellectual, like, oh, yes, there is this thing, but I was living it. I was right there. I mean, it was all around me. And it literally just knocked me to the ground. And tears were pouring out of my eyes. And whatever I saw, it didn't, like, it began with looking at the river. But then it didn't matter. It was a kid, it was a woman, it was a telephone pole. It didn't matter what it was. It was divine. It was God. And that was the moment I knew this is where I am meant to be. Like all of my previous life over here, and now this over here. So that was the moment. I did not know where. I did not know doing what. I did not have any idea. But fortunately, it didn't matter because my intellectual mind had been essentially rendered moot and mute. I was rendered nonverbal for many days. Pretty much all I could say was, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And logical thought of what does this mean, there was no place for it in my brain at that moment, which was great because it enabled me to just be in the experience and not simultaneously analyzing it or thinking about it. I just knew this is where I need to be. And that was 28 and a half years ago.
Amazing. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And I just think about my time at Parmarth Nikatan Ashram. Now, it's not even a fraction of what you just described, but the last time that I was there with you exactly 2 years ago, and I remember just before I was traveling home, heading to Dehradun Airport, going in the Mother Ganga River right there, hanging on to the chain, and every cell in my body felt alive. Now, I've made some foolish mistakes earlier in my life and done some drugs, and it was just like every cell in my body was like alive. I actually couldn't get out of the river in this just like energetically. I didn't want to leave. I was just standing there holding the chain, having to go catch my flight soon, and I didn't want to leave that experience. And I would definitely say it's not as profound as what you had, but there was something about that. And I guess like a question that's on my mind, you for it sounds like you had such a transcendental experience. You gained such clarity in that moment. And I'm curious, did you have any doubts before? Because you've surrendered your life fully to God. It's like you're full time in service, in this role. Were there were there any doubts at any point? Because I know at moments newer on my spiritual journey, I do have doubts. I'm curious if you went through that.
Absolutely. Not in the beginning, thankfully. Um, I think if I had doubted too much at the beginning, it might not have taken hold in as powerful a way as it did. It was certainly not the life path that I or anyone had anticipated I was going to live. And so I think that if there had been room for a lot of doubts at that point, I might have just given into them. But fortunately, in the beginning, there were not. In the beginning, I was so swept up in the ecstasy of it that I was sure this was exactly where I needed to be. As, sorry. As the years went by, there definitely were moments of doubt. Just one sec.
Mhm.
Sorry, we just got back from 6 weeks in the
Oh,
Mahakumbh Mela.
I saw that. We've been following that on Instagram. Oh my goodness.
Everyone there, everyone who was there with us, not just in our camp, but like across the Mela. One of the takeaways from the Mela was loss of your throat and coughing. It was just so incredibly dusty there that everybody just ended up, losing their voices. So doubts have definitely crept in as the years have gone by. The patterns, here's what I've learned. The patterns of our psyche don't disappear completely in spiritual experiences, at least not in the ones that I've had. Many of them are transformed completely. I mean, I was suffering severely from bulimia in my adolescence, in my early 20s. I was hospitalized 3 different times, very, very severely. And by 25, when I came to India, I had certainly learned to manage it, but it was a tight grip. It was a really tight grip of, the one day at a time. And it was a kind of meal by meal tight grip on food, on thoughts, on all of that. And that literally went away. I mean, just went away. The day I moved into Parmarth Nikatan, which was a week after I had had this experience, when I finally found the ashram and knew this is where I was meant to be. From the day I moved in, I ate in a dining hall in rows with all of the beautiful priests and students and everybody, and they would sing and clap and sing and clap and chant while food was being put on the plates. And the food was dished out of metal buckets. You sat on the ground cross-legged, and you couldn't even see what landed on your plate. I mean, what they were serving until it landed on your plate. And the rules were you had to finish everything on your plate. You could certainly refuse the next round of extras, but if it landed on your plate, you had to eat it. And literally, that part of it just disappeared by God's grace. About, a few days after I moved into the ashram, when I finally had this opportunity to speak with the spiritual master, Puja Swamiji, whom you know very well, who's my guru, and he sent me into the river Ganga to let go of anger and pain associated with the abuse and the abandonment from childhood. It went. Again, by grace, I actually was able to let it go. Now, of course, I had been in therapy. I mean, I had been working this for years and years and years. But as anyone who's worked with that type of stuff knows, just because you've spent years in therapy does not actually mean you're free of it. In many cases, it just means that you could write a book about it, but you're not actually free. And that was sort of where I was with what I was struggling with, where I understood it fully. I knew why I felt the way I did, but that didn't change me from being stuck in it. And I was able, through his guidance and instructions, and through total surrender, to let it go. And it wasn't that issues didn't ever come up around it, but the pain, the identification of it was gone. That being said, the very human package of doubts, of ego, of fear, of desire, of patterns that we learn in childhood, all of that, that was still very much present and would come up periodically. And there would certainly be moments of, oh my God, what am I doing here? Like, what does this mean? Why? moments of confusion, but fortunately, they were short-lived. Fortunately, not long after that, ignorance and ego and fear and desire and kind of stuckness in patterns would come up. I would have a beautiful experience of oneness and connection and just melting and merging back into the divine. And I would remember why I was here and why this was right. So yes, they absolutely did emerge, but never strongly enough that I needed to actually sit and say, okay, should I be making a different decision? And part of that is because I've also, from a purely intellectual standpoint, been really clear about life paths. I think one of the greatest disservices that a lot of the New Age movements are doing is convincing us that basically life is a buffet and that if you can visualize it, you can have it. And we can achieve anything. Absolutely. Unlimited possibility, unlimited potential. But it's a package deal. It's not a buffet. You have to make choices in life. You cannot simultaneously live full-time in Paris and full-time in Los Angeles. You cannot simultaneously be a full-time CEO, president of a company who's traveling all over the world as the president or CEO of the company, and a full-time stay-at-home parent at the same time. You can certainly do this for a while, then this for a while. You can do some of this and some of that. But you cannot do a full this and a full that. You have to make choices. And I think it's a really great disservice because I think that this idea that we somehow not only can do everything as in choose whatever you want and do it, but that we actually should be doing everything simultaneously. That we should be full-time, high-powered professionals. And we should be full-time stay-at-home parents. And we should be, full-time gardeners of our garden. And, don't forget the yoga practice and the meditation practice and going to the gym and, squeezing your own fresh squeezed vegetable juices every day. And, oh, you got to get the 8 hours of sleep a night. Don't forget that. And we're given, I think, an idea of life that is absolutely impossible. And it makes us super stressed. And it makes so many of us feel like failures because we're not able to pile it all onto our plate. And for me, it's always been acutely obvious to me that life was about choosing package deals. And that this package deal was by far the best package deal for me. Would I love to have figured out how to, squeeze in, more avocados into my life? Yes, absolutely. Would I love, there was a several year period where I was trying to figure out how to squeeze in a baby into my life. There have been times of, boy, wouldn't it be great if my plate could also include this? And I remember when I was having those baby feelings, saying to Swamiji, to my guru, gotta have a baby. I was like 31, 32, 33, something like that. And the hormones, the biochemical hormones were just all over the place of like, you gotta have a baby. And so, and of course I had taken vows of monastic celibacy and renunciation years earlier. And I went to him and I told him, and he said, no problem. He said, no problem at all. You can always go back. We'll, find you a nice person to get you married off to, and, because obviously my husband and I had long since previously separated, and no problem, get married, have a baby. And I said, no, I said that I don't want that. Like, I don't want the marriage. I don't want any of this. I just have this thing about a baby. And now he looked at me like, who's the scientist here? And there have been those moments of, wouldn't it be great if? And of course, by the way, because the universe is just incredible, right at that exact moment, this beautiful young girl literally fell into my arms and into my lap, who was just turned 5 at the time, and who I basically adopted and raised in many ways, and is now a amazing 27-year-old young woman. But point being that even if that had not happened, even if the universe had not actually provided that which I was craving for, it's really important to realize. And for me, I think this is one of the greatest gifts, was to know this from a young age, that it's not about a buffet. It's not about sit here in this life and wish that I had X, Y, or Z. It's about rationally saying, okay, I can leave this anytime. But is there a package, a full package, that actually sounds better to me than this? That actually would bring me greater happiness and fulfillment? And no matter what packages I envisioned, visualized, fantasized about, none of them held a candle compared to the package that I had. And so I've always been really grateful that I had that clarity of not thinking that I had made a mistake just because my life didn't have this or didn't have that, and then running back into a life that didn't have all of this. And yeah, it's been now almost 30 years, and I couldn't be more grateful that I was given that guidance and that I did make this decision, even in the midst of doubts.
Mm, beautiful. That's so helpful. So helpful to hear. I have, as always, I've got many more questions, but I want to start to shift us towards the idea of bhakti. And I know for us, each time we've traveled to Parmarth Nikatan Ashram and observed you in your leadership roles, and I've seen you embody the principles and the virtues of bhakti, of humility, of selfless service, of unconditional love. And I guess, would you share just a little bit from your perspective, what is bhakti? How does that manifest in your life, either as a practice, as a virtue? We would love to hear.
Sure. So bhakti means devotion. Devotion to the divine, love to the divine. But that love can be experienced and expressed in so many different ways. Traditional bhakti is seen through chanting, through worship ceremonies, through singing God's glories.
Mm.
And that's beautiful. And it's certainly one of my favorite things to do, is to chant and to sing and to just express that love for the divine. You've been in Arthi so many times, your group's been there so many times, to just be there and singing the glories, and it fills you with such a state of ecstasy. No pills, no half-life, no coming down, just a beautiful ecstasy. And yet, that experience of love for the divine, I also feel it in nature. I feel it at the foot of trees. I feel it in the dirt. I feel it in the ocean. So it's not that it has to necessarily be only in that which we would consider a religious framework. It doesn't necessarily have to include only that which would seem as religious practices. But it is a love for the creator, the creation, and that creator who infuses the creation with the presence of the creator. So in every blade of grass, in every drop of water, in every tree, in every mountain, in every bird, in every snowflake, and whatever it is that you're looking at, to be able to see just the incredibleness of the divine. One of the very, very, very few people I follow on Instagram is, if you see, if you go to who I follow on Instagram, it's basically all like NASA and National Geographic. And it's like when I open my phone, what I want to see are nebulas and the solar system and the universe and animals and, and all of that glory of this creation. Because through that, it's a constant re-reminder of the incredibleness of the Creator. So it doesn't have to be necessarily chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. It could be hugging a tree. I have had some of my most ecstatic moments hugging trees. But it is that feeling of love for the divine that just is ecstatic and flows through you and makes you want to sing, hug, and serve. It makes you filled with the yearning to serve because you are in love. It's the same yearning that when we fall in love, we, crawl out of bed early in the morning to go and cook breakfast and sort of surprise our beloved with breakfast in bed. Why? Because you're in love, right? Just that impetus of, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll sneak out of bed really early, really quietly, and then when they wake up, they'll have a fresh pot of coffee or fresh muffins or whatever it is. It's that same impetus. Oh, I know what I'll do. This is, this thing that I'm looking at is my beloved's favorite. I'll buy it for them. They'll be so happy. That inner calling to serve the beloved. And when you see that beloved in all, then it's out of Bhakti Yoga that Karma Yoga, the yoga of action, flows as just the most natural outcome of that love.
I love that. That's beautiful. Beautiful way to see how it seeing the beauty, the divinity in everything. It's there's that one shloka. I know the verse because we were studying it in class last night, but Gita 5:18, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavihastini Shunichaiva Svapaketa Pandita Samadarshanaha, and seeing the equality in everyone, and whether, of course, in people, but what I'm hearing is also in every living being, in the trees and
Absolutely.
nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and that's the aim. It's what Bhakti gives us. It's also, though, on a perspective of Dharma, it's what we are essentially taught over and over and instructed to do. If you look at the mantras, the prayers within the Sanatana Dharma tradition, in the Bhagavad Gita, as you said, but in the Upanishads and the Vedas, in our traditions, the prayers are for all. When we pray, for example, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, it's may all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy, not may all humans. All beings. We pray for all. When we say Vasudev Kutumbakam, the world is a family, doesn't only mean humans. Global family. So we are constantly being reminded of the preciousness, the divinity of all of creation.
What a way to live. What a darshana, a perspective to have. I'm just going to put it out there. We're gonna take questions here in a moment. So if anybody has questions, please raise your virtual hand or put them in the chat. Get our attention. I see we've got many yogis who have been with us to India over the years and been to Paramarth Nikatan Ashram are here, and that's nice to have you. And so we'll keep an eye and don't be shy. And I guess while we're waiting, we got a question. I'm just going to sneak this one in quickly before we come to our friend Sarah and George. How is Swamiji doing? We miss him. I feel like somehow I connect.
Wonderful.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that.
Wonderful. He's
Good.
wonderful, wonderful. Yes.
Amazing. Okay, Sarah and George over in the UK, come on down.
Hare
Hi.
Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna. um, in the beginning, when you were recounting your story, and you said that looking back to the youngster you could tell that you were spiritual, but you didn't have any kind of spiritual practice. I was just wondering if could you give some examples of how you identify that what you were doing in those days was spiritual, but it doesn't follow what we think of as the traditional practices.
Sure, great question. So, first of all, I was deeply, deeply, deeply dedicated and committed to truth. I was one of those truth at all costs people. So I never, ever, ever, for any reason, ever would have lied. I never wanted to be around anyone who lied. I mean, I just only wanted to live in truth. That was one piece. Another piece is my relationship with nature. The ecstatic experiences that I had in nature, lying in the dirt under the redwood trees, looking up as the light reflected and refracted through the branches of the trees, and I would lose hours. I can look back and say, oh, that's meditation. But I never would have used that word at that time. The commitment that I had to the protection and the preservation of this planet from a place within that felt truly a oneness with the trees, with the water, with the animals who were suffering. I was funny little tangent, but I was one of the very best canvassers Greenpeace had ever seen. I volunteered during holidays. I worked for Greenpeace during holidays. And I literally had people say things to me like, so let me get this straight. If I give you money, you'll get off my doorstep, right? Because it was so passionate for me and so fervent and so inconceivable that you would not feel the pain of the whales or of the dolphins that I could feel so intuitively that if necessary, I would stand there and talk to you at you until hopefully you could feel what it felt like, because then obviously the most natural outcome of that would be that you would support Greenpeace's efforts to protect and save them. So things like that in retrospect, I can look back on and say, oh, these actually were really spiritual things. Ways of living, ways of thinking, ways of feeling, ways of connecting. But I never would have labeled them that. They never fit into any of the spiritual boxes that I had ever seen.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Beautiful. Love it. Great question. Lovely response. We'll send some love, high vibes to Sarah and George over in the UK. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And now we're bringing it over. We got Sweet Home Alabama. Cece, welcome. You were with us. You were with us at Parmarth Nicotan a couple of years ago.
Yes. Yes. I want to thank you so much for being here. I got emotional because when I was there, I asked you a question because I noticed you kept pausing. When someone would ask you a question, or you would pause to listen. And I asked you that question, who are you listening to when you pause? Because of course, we all have intuition. We all have spirit guides, whatever you believe in. And I wanted to know, it was a test. And I'm sorry, it was a test to see. And you answered the best. It was just perfect answer. And that has guided me and continued, it made my faith, my listening to world and spirit, not world, but earth and it's made it stronger over the past 2 years. And I thank you for that. Also, my experience, because I'm already, I have the Christian faith, the Bible, and I stick with Happy Jack in the community because I can't find that connection to Earth and Mother Nature with the Bible. And I got emotional when you were talking about the Earth and connecting to her. And when I was in you reminded me when I was in the Ganges River that a group of us went down one night and we all helped each other hold the chain because the river was very active. And I'd gone in and I came back out feeling refreshed and alive. And while I'm watching everyone else go down, helping each other, I got this strong urge to share what I've learned at Happy Jack, what I've learned in India and Peru. And I didn't understand it. It took this long. And now this moment right here, I've been through a lot since I've been to India, and a lot. And this call right here has reminded me how connected I am to love and life. And I need to share that with everyone. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. This is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you for sharing, please. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Cece. I just acknowledge you and your commitment to your faith, your Christian roots and your tradition, and yet your openness, your willingness to learn. And without going into the details, you've been through the worst things that a person would ever face in their entire life these past few years. And we're just so happy that you're here with us and you're on this path and we get to walk together. And soon enough, you'll be back on the banks of holy Ganga for more purifying and cleansing. But thank you for sharing.
I want to share real fast. Something came to me. I need to share that this is not ours. These are experiences that we get to have, blessed with. And when you're creating your business, sorry, no, but when you're creating your business, it is not ours. You're working to whatever you believe in. It makes it easier for me anyway. Sorry. Thank you.
There's a beautiful teaching in the Upanishads that says very much this in terms of it not being ours. It says, Isha vasyamidam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat, tena tyaktena bunjita, ma gradaha kasya svidana. And it means, it's a lecture in and of itself, but just very quickly, it means everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine. There is nothing, no one, nowhere that is not pervaded by the divine. Therefore, be very careful. Do not think that anything belongs to you. Everything is the divine's, and everything is divine. Everything is God's, and everything is God.
Oh, love that. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much. Well, let's send all our love, high vibes to dear Cece in Sweet Home, Alabama. Thank you so much for sharing your heart. And I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Oh, we do. Beautiful. Oh my, I'm so happy, Mika, that you raised your hand. I didn't want to call on you, but I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I guess I think it's really funny because Hannah just happened to send me a link to this call today, and I'm studying, little update, Sadhviji. I'm at University of Toronto. I'm studying Hinduism and Buddhism, and I just wrote a thesis paper on Bhakti, and it's called Love Unbound, and it talks about kind of how Bhakti was a liberating force historically in Buddhism for gender and for caste. And I think the theme of this talk of distraction can also be a bind for a lot of people to access spirituality or access love or access a personal connection with God. And I guess my question is, seeing as maybe these constraints have shifted from caste or gender to our modern life of distraction, what is the best way? Where do we turn to find inspiration or to find something to relate to escape these binds, whether it's our own mental preconceptions that stop us from fulfilling our spirituality, or if it's society's kind of constraints? Yeah.
Beautiful. Where do we turn? Well, we turn ideally inward. But sometimes inward doesn't feel like the solve that we are looking for, because sometimes we feel like we're only able to access kind of the most superficial, shallow level inward. So we go inward and what we have is stress and self-judgment and negativity and patterns of thought. And that's when we turn to inspiring beings, to masters, to mentors, to leaders who have, whether they're still here in their bodies, whether they're no longer in their bodies, whatever tradition they may be in, but people who have lived lives of transcending not only the identifications of gender and caste and socioeconomic status and this and that. I mean, God knows these days all the different boxes we put ourselves in, political party, and, you know, where do you think COVID came from? And did you get vaccinated? I mean, we're looking for reasons and ways to put ourselves in boxes. And so we turn to those who have transcended boxes and who just remind us, you are not your box. You are not the size or the shape of your body. You are not its history. You are not the family it was born into. You are not the things that has happened to it. You are not how much someone is prepared to pay it for its skills and abilities or work. You're not how many people follow it online. It's not who you are. And to read the stories, the teachings, the lives of those who have mastered that transcendence of the box is, for me, very, very, very inspiring. The other thing that is very inspiring is nature. I mean, for me, it's just all about, like, get out and hug a tree. Get out and bathe in Ganga. You know, depending on where in the world I am at that moment, if I'm feeling a need for that reconnection and re-inspiration, and if simply closing my eyes and meditating for whatever reason doesn't feel like enough, or I need a different catalyst, inspiring beings, inspiring texts, the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, just pick up the Bhagavad Gita. It'll touch you, it'll inspire you, it'll remind you. Float in the ocean, hug a tree, play with, you know, a puppy or a kitty, pick up a newborn child. You know, all of these reconnect us with the perfection and the interconnection of the creation, and remind us of that presence of the divine here in form, in the manifest world that we occupy.
I love that. Beautiful response. Beautiful, beautiful. And Mika, thank you so much. It's so great seeing you. We haven't connected in some time. Mika was with us 5 years ago at Parmarth Nikitan Ashram when the whole world was panicking from the pandemic. And my goodness, you're still a young woman, but you were very young then, teenager. and you've really matured and you've really grown. And I'm so proud of you and what you're studying and their maturity. We see that. So
I was gonna mention that, but hesitated given.
No, don't hesitate. I have
But
quite the story.
I am so proud of you, and I am
Thank you.
so filled with joy to see that which we all knew, but you didn't know at the time, or you weren't able to access the knowledge at the time of the incredible being that was just on the verge of popping through the cocoon of you, and to watch that happen and to see that having emerged is so, so, so beautiful.
Thank you. And I'm coming back hopefully
Yay.
sometime this spring. And
Wonderful.
thank you so much. So amazing. Thank you so much.
I love it. Amazing. Well, we're sending all our love, high vibes. University of Toronto, Mika representing. Thank you so much. And I'm seeing more questions are coming in, but I want to be mindful of Sadhviji's time. It's late in India. She's already taken us after her commitments. I'm going to briefly just spotlight Ph.D. from Finland, just because to take darshan, because you were with us a few times at Parmarth Nikatan Ashram. But I do want to be respectful of time. Thank you so much for being here with us, Sadhviji. We really
Of course,
appreciate
and
it.
here's what we can do is if everybody puts their questions in the chat box, and then you send those to Tiffany or Preeti, they will give them to me in our evening satsang here, and we will take those questions in our satsang, and people can tune in live or watch later and actually get the answers to their questions.
I love it. Amazing. Well, thank you again so much. We're going to share links to all of Sadhviji's websites and Instagram so we can stay connected. And we can't wait to be back in the lap of Holy Ganga in the Himalayas. We're sending all of our love and high vibes to beautiful Rishikesh. And my friends, make it an amazing rest of the day. And we will see you again very soon. Namaste.
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 Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.